Now to a shameful story in Melbourne. A grieving wife forced to wait 40 minutes for an ambulance while her husband lay dying. Tragically, it arrived too late, with Karl Grant forced to tell her husband Stuart, "I'm sorry, they're not coming," as he died in her arms. "They're not coming," her final words. This all comes as burnt-out paramedics in New South Wales go on strike today, demanding better working conditions and pay. And we're joined now by paramedic Josh Taylor in Sydney. Josh, thank you so much for your time this morning. Karl's story is heartbreaking, and sadly it's one of many across the country. Can you explain to me how we got to this point?
Yeah, morning, Ali. Thanks for having me. Well, essentially, this has been happening for 10 years. We've been understaffed and overworked in the ambulance service. We have cars in Sydney Metro that do 10 to 12 jobs in a 12 to 16 hour shift and don't have a break. And essentially, if there's no one available to respond to a call because we're on low acuity jobs or we're understaffed, then people don't get ambulances. And in this case, someone who's really sick and then has ended up dying, Victoria's been so short that they haven't sent any response, which essentially that sort of thing requires an investigation and is rare. But it's, delayed responses and us not getting to people in a timely fashion is not uncommon.
Look, and you guys take your job so seriously, and I know that you feel it so much. So when you hear a case like what happened to Stuart, to Karl's husband, how does it impact paramedics?
They're tough ones because you can't train for that. It's completely out of our control. So when we turn up to a job, something like that, and most paramedics will have turned up to jobs like that, sick children, a major trauma, a drowning, an old person who's fallen on the ground and been on the ground for hours overnight in a cold night. You get there and people are either really nice or they can be really angry at you for not getting there quickly. And you just have to say, guys, apologise on behalf of the ambulance service, but we've been busy on jobs all day and we just get tasked job by job. And it's tough because you got to walk away from that knowing that what you've given is not what the government should be providing the people of New South Wales. So yeah, it's something you can't really prepare for. And when you finish a paramedic degree and you go into ambulance and you think you're going to go there and do, help people, and that's what you're dealing with on a daily basis, not being able to give the care that is required, it's tough, yeah.
Josh, you would have saw on Monday, we saw nurses striking and protesting, marching in the streets. They're broken, they're burnt out. I'm sure that's all something that that resonates with you. You've got industrial action plan for today. Do you feel this is the only way you can get your message across? And if you could say one thing to the Premier, what would it be?
Let me answer the last question first. Give Chris Minns a crack. We're done with the Liberal government at the moment. You've given us nothing. The only thing I've heard that is coming from the nurses' strike at the moment, and all power to you nurses, is that the Ministry of Health is considering taking action against the Nurses Union / Association for breaching an IRC order. So are they listening after a 1 in 10 year type of strike? No.
So how much do you think Chris Minns is going to give you? Have you had those conversations? What are you going to get from him that Perete's not going to give you?
Well, maybe I should have said give the Greens a go, because the Greens have suggested a nurse keeper type payment, and they've turned it a nurse keeper payment.
So how much are they going to give you?
I think it's 10 grand all up.
Okay.
Look, you know what we're asking for is keeping our salaries in line with Australian paramedics around Australia. I'll just give you one example. Our helicopter paramedics who undertake one of the riskiest jobs, civilian jobs in Australia, winching, doing roping into canyons, we get paid $94,000 a year, and in ACT that do pretty much the same job, they're getting paid 170 grand a year. So
Okay.
they're almost double what we're getting. And we're not asking for more than everyone. We're just saying, bring it up to parity. We live in the most expensive city in the world. Give us something that all these younger paramedics are going to be able to stay in the service for a decent amount of time and live in Sydney with.
All right, Josh, that's all we've got time for, unfortunately, this morning. But I think you've got your message across pretty clearly, and good luck with the industrial action today. Thanks, Josh.
It seems to be going round and round in circle, doesn't it, every couple of years? I know it's a state responsibility, a lot of that, but surely there's a way nationally we can approach this. And maybe it's a national fund for our frontline workers, funded by some of our industries that make a lot of money, vis-a-vis EG mining. I mean, maybe there's something like that we can do here, but something needs to be done. Let's move on. This is an important story, this. I want to highlight an absolutely tragic story. Front page of the Herald Sun in Victoria today, and I think this is shameful. A woman in Melbourne waiting 40 minutes, that's right, 40 minutes for an ambulance while her husband lay dying. Carol Grant, in the end, was forced to whisper to her husband, Stuart, "I'm sorry, they're not coming. I'm sorry, they're not coming." And he died in her arms. And that is happening right across the country. Today, paramedics in New South Wales are so burnt out, they've been driven to industrial action. Jackie, how do we fix this? We saw the nurses yesterday, a day before yesterday, and now ambulance officers.
Oh, you know what, Karl? This sort of stuff brings tears to your eyes. You've got to ask why the can. It's not just New South Wales, it's Tasmania, it's Victoria. We've got ramping, we've got paramedics, like you said, are on their last legs, let alone our nurses, especially after going through the pandemic. We already knew before going through the pandemic that we had weaknesses right across the country in our public health system. Nothing has been fixed. I have to ask why the hell we pay all these taxes, and we pay massive amount of taxes out there compared to many other countries, that we are still talking on a daily basis about Australia's public health system. You know, I know that we're very lucky to have it compared to the rest of the world, but by geez, surely the amount of taxes that we pay, we can do a much better job than what we're already doing.
No one seems
God
to...
help us if we have a massive pandemic
Right.
in the future and we lose control of that, because we've seen it just through going through COVID, and I don't think we've learnt anything from it yet.
This seems to be the problem.
Don't blame the states, mate. What I'm sick of is it's the state's responsibility. No. It's a state and the national government's responsibility. Is both your responsibilities. Stop avoiding it and get on with it and fix it, please.
OK, our political leaders stand up, and every time they do a press conference, let's thank, from the bottom of our hearts, our frontline workers, nurses and paramedics are right there in the front line, and still it goes on, Chris.
True. Two quick points. When we have holidays like it occurred at the late part of January, do the ambulance services in states and territories adequately equip the sudden population density that occurs in places where that man couldn't get an ambulance? What I'm saying is, people are on holidays, the demographics change. Shouldn't we be farming ambulance fleets into some of the smaller areas that don't need them?
The point is, and you make a good point, but the point is, on top of that we need to be aware of this, and we need to be able to move and shift and be a bit more fluid about it. Flexible. But,
Yeah.
but we can't even do the basics right in the cities at the moment.
Correct. And we've got all the money to be able to do this. We've got to make sure that we're on point and we're dedicating ambulances in the right places. That would be my first point. The second point would be, here we have a situation where we've twisted, torn and stretched our health system during this pandemic. We're seeing the inadequacies. In some ways, that's a good thing. We've got to be able to get beyond the pandemic and make appropriate changes. OK, whoever comes up with that and whoever does it is going to find themselves having a good time in government for a while, I would have thought. Yeah.